I want you to take a look at the difference between these two royal pillows here for these crowns. My personal observation between these two pillows is one being Williams and the other being of Bavaria and the other being the royal Czech crown. It's the pillows themselves, they're similar, and I've found several others of Europe that follow the red with the gold like that. But in my statement and in the last video, video 6, I mentioned that we were flinging the pillows around like frisbees. Well, the observation I made was that the Czech pillow here is much more easily flung in its design than the Bavarian pillow. And obviously I've made claims to both these crowns and I stick to that, and why wouldn't we have the pillows as well? But in no disrespect to the governments at all, I'm just reciting what happened as a kid. Was it would have been much easier to fling the Czech crown pillow, and in fact those little shields on there, even at a young age, I believe we were pretty sharp on as my brother and I were on automobiles back in the day, and those little shields on the Czech, those are very close in design in the outside shape to a Porsche. And I remember looking at those and studying them back in the day, and that was a recall point that we had, that I had this in hand, studying those and thinking how similar they were to something on an automobile. But nevertheless, I'm thinking that it was much easier to fling the Czech pillow, and I'm thinking this is the one that got flung around. Although there is no lion's head on the Czech pillow in its corners, there is on the Bavarian. And I did try to pull a lion's head off a red pillow similar to these. Again, we had both these crowns, so that's just an observation, and I just want to make a correction as I found it, or I suspect a correction here. So we'll just move on. Thank you. This is the reliquary of Saint Foy. A few different angles here. The church is located in the Pyrenees region of France. Conquest, C-O-N-Q-U-E-S. Nevertheless, I'll read this whole article in a second here. If you care to, you can go back and take a look at this reliquary. The last picture shows a reliquary with flowers and little receptacles in the hands. When we first discovered, this was the first of several reliquaries that we had. I'm not saying this is the first one we have. This is the first one that I believe we're talking about. We didn't know what those little receptacles were. The hands were like this, and there was just a couple little receptacles there. We didn't know what that was all about. We thought there was something missing. And I remember looking for something that we thought maybe it was a tray that fit across that he was holding up, but we didn't know. The other thing that was interesting and that I found in the description of this is we did notice it looked like there were additions put on this over a period of time. In fact, the feet on this reliquary, and I don't think there's any picture of that here, the feet were not to scale. But nevertheless, we had this, and no disrespect to those people that worship this idol here. All I'm trying to do is bring forward what we had, and there's a lot of it. So here's the article here out of the site I use. Now the site I use is it's not golden, as far as it's not carved in stone. Anybody can contribute to it. And I don't use this site other than it's a quick reference, and I think we all understand how that information gets in there. But nevertheless, I had, in my 6-month investigation, I didn't stop for very much, only to try to cover what could help establish a point of reference, that trying to draw between fact and fantasy. But anyway, it says here, the golden statue reliquary of Saint Foy dominated the treasury of conquest. Catching a glimpse of the reliquary was the main goal of the pilgrims who came to conquest. The head of the reliquary contains a piece of skull which has been authenticated. The reliquary is a 5th century Roman head, possibly the head of an emperor, mounted on a wooden core covered with gold plating. Made in the later half of the 9th century, the reliquary was 2 feet 9 inches tall. As miracles reportedly increased, the gold crown, earrings, and gold throne, filigree work, and cameos and jewels, most donations from pilgrims, were added. In the 14th century, a pair of crystal balls and their mounts were added to the throne. Silver arms and hands were added in the 17th century. In the 18th century, bronze shoes and bronze plates on the knees were added. In the 19th century, the author and antiquary Prosper Mérimée, appointed the first inspector of historical monuments inspired through restorations. Well, maybe this is a window. Maybe in those records it'll say when they got this back, and we all know it was in the middle 50s. So there you have it. We had this, no doubt in my mind. I remember studying this for the longest time. It's not very heavy. In fact, we knew that they call it gold plating. It's actually sheeting that's draped over and kind of formed onto the statue there. There wasn't a whole lot to figure out there, but we had this, and hopefully I didn't put too much damage on it. But there's so much more to cover here. We had, remember, a 2-bay garage with a lot of stuff in there, and this is one of the many reliquaries. This is something I've been wanting to bring up for some time. It's a very important piece to a lot of people in that region in France, that part of Europe. I mean, no disrespect to anything here. I'm just trying to record what I believe is the facts about the stuff that we had. And we're going to move on here. This is a copy of a portrait of Marie of the Romanov children, and the next one, I think it says, is Tanushka portrait by Devachka. I'm not a historian. I don't purport to be a historian. I'm just trying to cover what we had. I don't remember the names of the kids other than what I had labeled underneath the photographs or these images as I've caught them out there in the world. What I wanted to say is, what I found out about these portraits is, I think there's only 1 or 2 that's ever showed up. I think we had 4 of these portraits, and they were large pictures. I'm thinking these frames were maybe 1.5 feet wide by 2 feet tall. I remember propping these portraits in frames and with glass covering up against one of these crates or a type of foot locker. And I'm thinking we had at least 4 of these portraits, and they said only a few has shown up. I don't think I destroyed them, so they're still out there. Somebody's coveting these things. And gosh, that that first one there, that's a pretty nice portrait. Who wouldn't want to keep that? But anyway, we're moving along. I got a lot to share with you right here. This is something I've been wanting to share with you for some time. There's quite a story I have on this one. My brother and I found this necklace in it was a tray, and it was probably, gosh, that thing was wide. It was maybe 16 inches wide by about 8 to 10 inches deep, and it was like a velour case, a hard case. It was only about that thick, and inside this case it was molded in, I believe, in another velour, outside being like a gray or silver velour, and the inside being similar to that, if not in some white. We took this out and it was heavy. I mean, this piece, it seemed like it weighed about 3 pounds. At some point between taking it out of this tray, we had noticed that it appeared to come apart, that there was 2 pieces. The top neck piece was separate from the, let's say, the breast piece. And I later found out that information based on this. That never turned up. That's out there somewhere. Somebody's got it. It never turned up based on the information I found. And one of the reasons may be because this piece was so heavy. What is constructed of is a series of wires. I'd say they're steel wire. I don't know if it's stainless steel or what. It must be, because these steel wires are very strong. They were thick wire. I would say they weren't, in our measurement, they weren't quite a 1/16 of an inch, but they might have been 3/32. Or what am I trying to say? Less than a 1/16, but more than a half of a 1/16. I'm just trying to get through this. I have so much to share here. It got bent. The top piece to the bottom piece, the way it was constructed, those wires got bent. They got bent badly because of the weight. We tried to disassemble it, or I did, while holding it. And by holding it with all that weight, those wires got bent. And I can remember the last time I saw this, I put this back in this tray, which was designed to receive it and lie it flat. It wasn't flat anymore. In fact, I kind of smashed it down into this tray and put it in there while the tray was bumped up probably twice the distance of what it should have been. But unfortunately, I'm sorry you didn't get it back, but who knows, maybe somebody stripped that down for the value of what it was, but or somebody's still holding it the way it is. Nevertheless, we had that, and I put a lot of damage on it. Moving on. This is the blue serpent egg. You should notice that it is bent. It's leading to the left here. Here's another shot. We had that egg. It's in the Prince of Monaco now owns this egg. The other thing I wanted to mention is that serpent, if you want to go back and look at it, it's bent. It's actually bent a little bit to the right. Now this is actually a clock. I don't think it was that difficult to pick that out. I think there was a key to it. I don't know if we ever found the key, but we used to wind it just by spinning, I think, that white dial there where the numbers were on. Somehow it got bent. We're sorry about that, but we did have this clock. And it was a nice piece. We didn't know it was a clock, didn't know how it worked. We did find someplace on there where a key goes in. Nevertheless, we had this. Moving on, there's more. We also have this one. And my brother found the little bird that was on the inside, and I'll share that with you. I was behind the garage in the area where I threw away one diamond off the off egg. My brother came around into the small area what we used to play in, make our forts and stuff, and he had this egg, and all of a sudden he turned it on, and he had this little bird popped out of the top, and it started chirping this this tune, and we were just amazed at how this even worked. But again, this was just another one of those things. It was hard to remember this one until I remembered my brother coming around to the back of the garage where I was at. Who knows what I was doing back there? I was probably experimenting with we felt like scientists at one time, all these new discoveries, and trying to find out answers as to what these things were and how they worked. But there's still more. This is the Battle of Pavia by Giovanni Bernardi. It's at the Walters. Out of the many images I have in my computer, I just ran across this, and I was just going to say that we had this. It appears that we had it, but I wasn't going to pay too much attention to that. We had something that looked just like this, with that gold frame, and since the Walters have it, and they have a lot of stuff that we have, then I'm not holding back. I'll say that this has to be the one that we had too. But I was just going to let it slide and say this looks like one that we had. But again, Walters has a lot of stuff that we had. And in fact, talk about that Turkish rifle. I remember now how that mechanism is on the inside, which how it's designed in order to open up. So if I remember how that mechanism is designed, then obviously we were inside the receiver, and there just may be further decoration in there. But I remember how that worked and how it was designed, and that, well, I got so much to share with you. We'll get on with it here. Since we're on the subject, I just drew this up. This is a mechanism inside the receiver, how it's attached to the bottom of the receiver. Those rods extended to the circles, and the rods were, at the end, they were rounded to be bent around these devices here so that it would swivel, and there was no attachment, as I remember, to the top going up. There could have been, because the top of the receiver shows a piece of metal there, a strap across toward the rear. It could be that there's a top suspension, but this is how it was designed. There were two loops on the inside, and the loops on the end of the rods were connected to that, and it swiveled. For whatever that means, there it is. And one more point I'd just like to make too is on the inside of the receiver, it's all gold too, and that little swivel, those two little circles, that's a gold color. So it's pretty much, it follows the developer, the designer, the artist's intent. It's gold in there too, with I believe additional jewels is somewhere in that interior. The very bottom of this egg, I remembered, because those little decorations, they look like candy. That's why I remembered it. I remembered this one not so much for the egg, but for that little rabbit. That was scary as hell. This, of course, is a Kremlin egg. I don't remember it as much, but I'll go over it. I think the Kremlin egg is the one that my brother didn't let me touch. I don't think I ever lifted that up, but I can the images keep haunting me. I remember something looked exactly like this laying down there amongst a lot of other stuff, and I don't think my brother let me touch it because he didn't want me to damage it, and I guess that was a good idea. But yeah, this one keeps haunting me. You know, the one thing that I had mentioned earlier is I should go under hypnosis and bring back. I could probably be more descriptive and have more of a a history of events that took place. There is a lot out there and a lot in there that I think can be told. I believe this is labeled the Kelch egg, and yeah, we had this too. In fact, more about that egg is I believe I have my blood DNA on that egg. I cut my fingers on a little glass, I don't know, jar, vase out of the Thutmose III, and my brother had found this one. I walked into the garage from handling that small busted or that vase, and then handled this after he went for another egg. And there's some dark spots on that. I think this is called the lapis lazuli egg, of the Kelch. And that little crown right there, well, it's not hard to figure out. It's about the size of a walnut. But yeah, that we had that. In fact, there was, as I remember, there was a string on that, a black string, and I removed it. And that string, I think, was probably about 12 or 14 inches long. It was a braided, fine, I'm not sure the material was. It a braided fine silk? I don't know. But it was kind of had a sheen to it. But I removed that. I'm not sure what's on there today. But yeah, I can't remember whether the string was on that little ruby on there or on the crown. I think it actually was on the ruby, but nevertheless, it was attached there somewhere. I took it off. There's something else on there today, and I'll bring up that jar from the Thutmose III and show you where I cut my fingers, and there's a little bit to share with that as well. Here's that lapis lazuli Kelch egg with a crown in it again. The reason why I brought this up again is there's some dark spots on this lapis lazuli. I kind of checked out lapis lazuli. It looks like it's a stone that's indicative of Afghanistan. But some time ago when I discovered this egg and the connection with the jar, because I felt that I bled on the outside of this egg, and I'm thinking, if I did that, are those dark areas that are found in this photograph that you can just barely see? I don't know how the definition is going to work for you on your screen and how this comes out, but my DNA could be on there, could be those dark spots on this. Now I'll go after that jar. This is that jar that's in the Metropolitan. The next shot will show you how ragged the edge is, and is that my blood on in the middle there, underneath the lip? I don't know. Here's a shot compared to other jars. I believe we had these jars as well. What is the most memorable part of this, the jar in this, the second shot of the jar, is there's a little nick that's removed on the top of the lip. That locked me in on that. And talking about if my DNA and blood is on there, there were stains in there to begin with. And as I was rolling this jar around and examining it, is when I cut my finger. And I didn't realize I had cut my finger because my blood was the same color as the stains that were already in there. As I didn't realize that I had cut my finger because it was the same color. And who knows, it might have been somebody else's blood in there. But nevertheless, I cut my finger on this jar, and the next thing I handled was that lapis lazuli Kelch egg with that little crown in there. So on the outside of that lapis lazuli Kelch egg, it could very well be my DNA on that as well. Moving right along. If you look at this jar, you'll see how similar it is from the other shot with the 3 jars with the other white jar. And the point I wanted to make is one of those 2 white jars is quite magical. When we discovered these, and I was one of the white jars, I lifted up the lid, which was down there pretty tight. And when I lifted it up a couple of times and examining and putting it back down over the course of a few days, I remember the lid started to become much looser. And I remember pushing down on the lid and having it secure, and then getting back to it a few seconds, a minute later, whatever, and the lid was ajar. It was lifted up on the edge. And so I pushed it back down. And then at some point I realized it was back up again. I thought, wait a minute, I thought I pushed that down. So after that thought, I realized, well, let me push that down again and let me observe how this thing, does it raise by itself? And you know, it actually did. It took about, and it was, I'm thinking 6 or 8 seconds before that jar actually, the lid popped up by itself. And it was remarkable. It would do that over and over again on about the same time duration. It would take a few seconds and it would push itself up. So it was easy to remember that once I discovered the lid scenario on that. It was very similar to the other lid. Again, this jar is Thutmose III, and it's at the Metropolitan. And it was one of those 2 white jars that this lid is quite magical in itself, that it lifts up all by itself. Here is that St. Wenceslaus, see, what do you call that? I guess you call that the skull, pillow, crown, and platform. What I wanted to say is I was able to find an image on the side that that strand had come loose on. And I'm actually thinking at this point that that strand is probably the gold strands that look like almost like shoelaces that carry along the side there. They're crisscrossed. I believe the colors, now that I think about it, the colors I'm trying to describe is gold and white. I think of the white was the center core of the gold strands, but these are, I believe this is what had come loose that was dangling there. And I'm almost going to give that a longer length, as I think it got, as it was coming apart, I think it may have gotten as far as about 14 inches long. But nevertheless, there it is. I'll stick with gold and white as far as the color of the strand on that as it was unraveling. I don't remember now, think about it, that there was red in that. But we are wrapping up on 30 minutes here. I think we've completed part 7. And thanks for watching, and don't forget to turn your sound down. All right, we're working on part 8 coming up.